have lots of questions for you, and I'm sure there might be people who will chime in who have lots of questions for you. So we're just going to get right into it right now. I know just a little bit about you, enough to be able to get you to answer every question that I'm going to ask you. So we'll start with saying that you used to be an attorney. Tell me a
Correct.
little bit about that.
I started practicing in 1989, and I basically worked for another attorney, and then went on my own about a year later. Started doing the public defender list, and after that, just went on my own and started handling criminal defense. That was my specialty, criminal defense. I did it for a little over 20 years, and a couple high-profile cases, but yeah, mainly criminal defense.
Right. So prior to that, you were a police officer for a little bit. How long did you stay on the force? And
Well, I went to Northeastern, and it started off as a co-op job. I was a police officer in the town of Meredith, New Hampshire, which is up in the Lakes region near Laconia.
right.
And I worked co-op for 3 months, and then the chief came to me and he said, "Hey, geez, we never had a Jew up here. Maybe you want to come on full time." I didn't, I didn't take it the wrong way. I said, "Yeah, no, I'd love to." So I went to kind of a limited police academy because I didn't plan on staying full time, but I ended up working there for another year and a half, and then I started applying to law schools.
Wow. So you decided to move on to greener pastures and you decided to become an attorney.
Yeah,
So you like practicing law because
I
you did.
love I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah, you started off as a public defender. What was that like for you? Because
Well,
they say public defenders are not, they don't do a great job.
they don't have a good reputation, and I'll tell you, I hate to say that I was different from but I just had a completely different mindset. And part of it might be because my third year of law school, I worked for the Committee for Public Counsel Services, and all I did was bail hearings.
Wow.
And it was in Suffolk Superior Court and Boston Municipal Court. So the majority of my clientele was African American. And, you're just kind of in the trenches, and you see that these people, whether they did something wrong or not, they're just human beings. And, I just got that taste from the very beginning that I just wanted to help these people and help them. Maybe I had the idealistic point of view that I could turn them straight or set them straight. Whether
Right.
it was idealistic or not, that was just my mindset from day one.
So how old were you when you became an
Let's see. So I graduated Northeastern in 1986. So I was 24, and then I went to law school, and I graduated law school when I was about 28.
So I'm definitely behind the eight ball going to school to be an attorney now. I'll be
Yeah.
50 by the time
It's never too late.
I know that's right. I
Yeah.
agree with you. So
Yeah.
as you went on as an attorney, something happened that
Yeah.
changed the course of your life for a long time. And you ended up going to prison, not just
Yeah.
jail, you ended up going to prison. You ended up being sentenced
Yeah.
out of Norfolk Superior Court, a court that you probably practiced in more than you could count.
Yeah.
Um, you were sentenced by a judge who you may have even gone before. And
It was actually in Suffolk Superior Court.
wow, that's
Yeah.
and so what was a judge that you went before in Suffolk?
Judge Fabricant, and I hate to tell you what her nickname was, but you might be able to surmise. But any event, I tried a couple cases before her, and she was that type of judge that had no tolerance for somebody that was outside the law, regardless of whether it was just a mistake or some sort of transgression. She just had no tolerance for it whatsoever. Very, very straight laced.
So she definitely didn't cut you any breaks when it came to your case.
Well, no, and originally I got in front of Judge Ball, which I loved. And yeah, I tried a case in front of her that was actually very highly publicized back in 2004 when my client ran down five people and killed one of them over near Northeastern after the Patriots lost the Super Bowl. And one of the victims happened to be the captain of the state police's son. And that was just, they were all over me. And I think when they were able to finally get their hands on me, they really wanted to put the screws to me, because I pulled some criminal defense attorney stunts, but just in an effort to zealously represent my client. It wasn't anything. It might have been on the borderline, but it was perfectly legal what I did.
Right. So you ended up running into the law yourself. Did you get arrested prior to being,
Never arrested, only indicted and then
so
arraigned. And back to your point, going into Suffolk Superior Court, where I probably spent at least 2.5 to 3 days a week there representing criminal defendants. It was tough. All those court officers knew me. All the judges knew me, and I think they had a certain amount of respect for me because I didn't back down from them. And to a point, they respect that. When you go over the line, they don't like that. But when you argue with them and you don't take their answer as the gospel, and you
right.
actually try to represent your client instead of just saying yes, Your Honor, yes, Your Honor. I mean, I think they do have a certain amount of respect for that, and that's who I was. And I think it was kind of shameful to walk in there and be in the lockup where I would go down and see a client, and then I find myself in that same cell that I went and saw, hundreds and hundreds of clients.
Do you feel like as the judge was sentencing you, she was looking at you as a disgrace to attorneys and to the law itself?
I think she kind of had the attitude of like, you should have known better. And, for me, it was constantly, taking these defendants and trying to humanize them in front of a judge. And now I felt like here I am doing the same for myself. So, I mean, I think she thought part of what I said to her was contrived because, once a defense attorney, always a defense attorney,
Right.
so I think I lost credibility in that respect. But, whatever I said came from my heart, but I don't think she saw it that way.
So what were your initial charges? Did you ever get to district court or was this a secret indictment?
No, it was a secret indictment. I mean, it wasn't that secret. They indicted, they brought my secretary in, all the people around me, and one of my best friends of 40 years who I hired to run my part of my practice. He turned on me, and it would have been one thing if he turned on me and told the truth, but he kind of embellished what I did to make himself look better, and that he had no idea what was going on, which,
Right.
they have a term for that in jail. They call them rats, and that's basically what he is. But yeah, I mean, it was just basically it started off as insurance fraud and then misuse of client funds.
Okay. And so as you're going through the system, because I know that you're married and I know you have children, what was your home life like? Seeing as though now you're not dad, you're not husband, the attorney, you're now in the trenches with the same people that you were in the trenches with before, but just on a different side.
Yeah.
What was your home life like?
I mean, while I was going through it, my wife is probably one of the most moralistic people I know, and her father was a judge in Rhode Island.
Oh,
So, and she's an attorney also, and she'll go overboard the other way to not cross the line than even get close to the line, where criminal defense attorneys live very, very close to the line because that's just what you're doing. You're trying the best for your client within the bounds of the law. And sometimes you just get very, very close to that line, trying not to step over it, but still, sometimes, criminal defense attorney, I think they feel like, the means, the ends justify the means sometimes.
absolutely.
And, that might not be the best way to look at it, but when I know that this guy deserves another chance, I might do something, where there's a hanging judge in court. So I call in sick one day, even though I'm not sick, or I don't show up purposely. So, and then they call my office. Oh, he's in another court. And, get me proof from that other court. I got to run to the other court and make an appearance. Oh, I'm not supposed to be here. And, kind of just pull a stunt that maybe isn't the most ethical, but something that you go to those ends for your client when you know that they're worth it.
Right. So your wife stood by you,
She
even
did.
though, even though she, like you said, she's one of the
Yeah.
moralistic people in your life.
Yeah.
How did your children react to you?
They were young, 6 and 8 at the time, and I was their world, and I just kind of felt like their world was just ripped from underneath them. And I remember the very first time they put me in South Bay, and then I was only there for about 18 days, and then I got transferred to Norfolk. And part of the reason was I had a very good lawyer who was very influential, a guy named Martin Leppo.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, and Marty basically represented me for nothing because I grew up with him. He was my neighbor.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, he got me transferred to Norfolk because it was easier for my wife and children. My wife, I would say, probably out of the entire time I was there for 2 years. She came and visited me almost, every single visiting day. And at the beginning, she was coming every single day, and that's why they threw me out of South Bay, because she was manipulating the system. So they
As an
moved me.
attorney,
Yes, so she could come anytime she wanted to.
right?
So I mean, there was this guy DeFazio. I think he was the
Nathan DeFazio,
yeah. He basically said, he was going to put me in the gang unit to teach me a lesson. And I walk in there, and I'm in the unit where all the new people come in, and I'm in a cell by myself with everybody had TVs. I didn't.
right?
I didn't even know how to shut the light off. I slept with the light on for 3 days straight because I didn't. There was this little metal button on the wall. I had no idea. I thought they were just playing mind games with me, but you come to acclimate to whatever conditions you put up under.
Unfortunately,
Yeah,
not the greatest conditions. So
yeah,
your children, they were young. Your wife, ultimately, obviously, she stuck by you.
yeah.
What was your final sentence and what was your sentence structure?
They originally, the DA asked for 6 to 8 years in state prison. My lawyer appealed to the judge and ended up getting me 2.5 on and after in county.
Right.
So basically a 2.5 year concurrent sentence. So no, consecutive. So basically a 5 year sentence in county. Yeah.
Yeah, as up to 5 years, and then you serve one, and then you can earn good time on that. Did you earn good time on that?
You can't earn good time on it because basically all it does is come off it shortens your parole. Yeah.
Right. Did you end up getting parole?
Yeah. I mean, I was there for pretty much almost exactly 2 years. I ended up becoming the cook for the administration and the sheriff, and because they trusted me. And I got in trouble a few times. They put me in solitary a few times because I was helping people write motions, and I was getting people credit for time served that their lawyers failed to get them.
Oh, they used a guerrilla tactic on you, so they didn't
They
want
did.
you to help other people, and they said that they'd give you a ticket for it if
Yeah.
other people do what you've been doing for the last 20 years, and there was nothing illegal about that.
Yeah. And they actually told me that if I continue to do what I'm doing, they were going to transfer me to Barnstable. So my wife would have to drive 2 hours to see me and my kids.
So you ended up getting parole.
Yeah.
Prior to getting parole, you said you had a little bumps and bruises, but what was your day-to-day life like, seeing as though you were an attorney and you were in and out of the courtroom? And I'm sure that you've had clients that you've heard all the stories about what jail is like, what happens, what the COs are like, and how much they hated it, even though it may not have been their first time going in.
Yeah.
What was it like for you to experience some of what other people talked about?
I think at the beginning it was a lot of despair and a lot of just trying to come to terms with where I was and how I got there. And, obviously you have plenty of time to reflect. And that's what I did. And then, I just kind of saw it as my mission to try to help people any little way that I could, whether it was writing a motion for somebody. Every day I would put a quote up on the wall. I had this whole book of quotes with, I at one point in time, my cell consisted of a guy that had done 30 years in state prison for robbing armored cars, a Nazi skinhead, and here I am, Jewish. And yeah, and then this other African-American guy who just wouldn't even speak a word to me. And every day I put quotes on there by Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and John F. Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson. And, they started kind of seeing that I wasn't really a threat to any of them. And, they started coming around in their own little way. And even, when some of these people that, I guess, the old adage, you don't have friends in jail, you only have acquaintances. And, there were people that left there, and the day before they left, I'd write them a whole note and leave it under their door, and as kind of an inspirational thing I thought I was doing something, and then maybe 2 weeks later, I'd see them walking down the hall in intake,
Right.
But
Did you see, because I'm sure you saw it in the courtroom, you saw it with Boston police, whatever police department you dealt with, systemic racism. Did you see it? while you were on the inside?
100%. The COs in Norfolk, in Suffolk as well. I was only there for a short time at Norfolk. Probably one of the most racist bunch of people I've ever encountered in my life. And they had all these like terms that they would confide in me because I was white. And they would talk to me like I was a racist. And, at the time, I kind of, have this internal struggle with myself because I didn't stand up to them.
Right.
But I don't really think I was in a position to stand up. And that may not be an excuse, because today I stand up like there's no tomorrow, and I'll argue with anybody when if they say something.
Right.
But the CO once said to me, he used the N word. He said they're on Roxbury time. They sleep all day and they're up all night. And and this guy ended up running for sheriff. And I have memoirs, and I recorded every single word that every single one of them said. And and when he was running for sheriff, I went to a CO that I knew very well on the street, and I said, if this guy gets close, I'm going to expose this guy. I don't care what's going to happen to me, but I'm going to expose him, because he can't be sheriff. It's just, I just can't imagine this guy as sheriff. He ended up losing. He didn't even make a bid for it, but just that, yeah, I mean, the racism was terrible. In Norfolk's a white county, and there were a lot of blacks in there. And I was friends with all of them. And, the whites would say, oh, you're going to be racist by the time you leave here. You can't hang out with them. And a couple of times I sat down at a table. There were 5 black guys sitting at the table, and 2 of them got up and left when I sat there. And then, and the white guys would outcast me because I sat with them. But I think they kind of got to know me as someone that just didn't care and crossed those lines. And I think that in a way they let it go and they respected it, but they all had the same line to me. If you were up in state prison, somebody would bash your head in. And that's what they always said to me.
Of course, that's the famous line, I think.
Yeah.
Now, it seems like you had a normal day in the life of what an inmate would go through every single day. And then it was time for parole. How did you feel going up for parole, seeing as though you were an attorney, and now whoever comes in, 9 times out of 10, they're doctors, they're attorneys, they're different people just sitting on the parole board. And they were going to be looking at you for the crimes that you committed. But more importantly, it was not about the crimes. It was the fact that you were an attorney and you took it to uphold the law, and you did not do it. And better yet, they're looking at you like you did the stupidest thing ever. And you're sitting here serving a 5-year sentence, and now you want me to help you. Did you ever think about any of that before you went up for parole?
I did. And I'll tell you, that was probably one of the most stressful days of my life, not knowing. I think when you're in jail, especially doing 5 years, you don't know if you're going to do 1 year, 2 years, or 5 years. You have no idea whatsoever. It's not in my hands. It's in somebody else's hands. And when I went up in front of parole that day, I mean, I was just completely stressed out and just didn't know what was going to happen. Come to find out that when I went into the parole and they asked me a bunch of questions, they told me that 2 COs and one of the administration came to him. And he said, in 30 years, this parole office has been doing this, and that's never happened. And he said his original decision was to deny me parole, but since these 3 people came forward, he granted me parole. And he said he would have let me out that day, but they had to notify the victims that I was being released.
Wow. So again, you have some people on the inside who stand up for you, but at this point, you really have no respect for them, because now you see what your clients were talking about all this time.
Yeah.
They're saying all these things about how it is in there and how they don't want to go back. And you lived that life for how long?
2 years.
For 2 years, and then you got out on parole. When you got out on parole, where'd you go?
Back to my house. And I was actually on parole and probation at the same time, still on probation. This is 12 years later, and I'm still 10 years later, I'm still on probation.
What type of probation sentence did you get?
10 years, but I've been paying restitution, and they keep extending it. This is probably the last time they'll extend it. There's a new case that I kind of have in my breast pocket that that says that they can't extend probation just for the payment of monies that, they have to collect it during that time. I don't want to use it yet until the time comes, because 2022 is when I'm supposed to be off parole.
Wow, so you've spent a lot of time. When you got out, what was your biggest challenge? Because now you're not an attorney
No,
anymore. You know the law, but you're not an attorney anymore. And the bottom line is that you're a convicted felon who has a Corey attached to their name. So what was your plan of action? You were on parole and probation. That means if you violate one, you violate the other. The two go hand in hand, no matter which one you violate.
and if I did violate, I could have subjected myself to 10 years. So, I mean, my plan of action was just to get any job that I could. And I ended up working at a scrapyard in Avon, hauling iron and, really just a lot of grunt work. And that's what I did for probably about a year and a half.
How did your kids take to you? Because now dad has been gone for 2 years. I'm sure somebody told them. Your case was publicized. I was doing some research and I was like, my goodness. And I had to read over and I'm like, my goodness. I can only imagine what people are thinking just by what they're reading without even knowing who you are as an individual, what really took place. This was highly publicized, but only because you were an attorney, because people actually do what you did or what they allege that you did every single day.
Yeah.
And you don't hear about it. And they're in the court system, but because you were an attorney, they took it to a whole nother level. It was like they wanted to shame you.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Yeah. They wanted to shame me and they wanted to stick it to me as hard as they could. So, I mean, that was just what I was up against.
And since you were up against that, you still had a family, a mom, a wife, and kids that supported you. And what was it like for your kids to have you home finally after 2 years?
I mean, my kids kind of got into the routine. I mean, a couple times they said, Dad, you don't make the rules. You haven't been here for 2 years, but in my wife, there was no question. She was ecstatic that I was home, but there was that deep-seated resentment for, abandoning her for 2 years. So there was that dichotomy that I had to deal with. And, it took some time for those wounds to heal. And, I often think, my kids were young when I went and they were aware where I was and they came to visit me every single visiting day. And, and for me to just watch them walk out and that steel door closed behind them and they go out into the world and I'm stuck, in Groundhog Day.
Right.
It was disheartening. But I think, it took a while. It probably took a good year and a half to kind of get back to some form of normalcy and to see that. And to be honest with you, even when I was out working at my friend the scrapyard, I wasn't making a lot of money, but these thoughts went through my mind. What can I do to make money? And you have those thoughts, like you want to transgress again, and you try to talk yourself out of it, and you do, but not everybody has that luxury or that mind to be able to talk themselves out of doing something like that.
And as you went on, you just decided to stay on this side of the fence. And as you said, a lot of times we come out and we have every intention of doing the right thing. And then when you feel like you're behind the eight ball, is what I'd like to call it, and you feel like you're not getting anywhere, you decide to say, hey, listen, I'm going to do something different. But you did not. And you did not because, was there any particular reason why you didn't? You didn't want to go back to jail? Your family, your children? Was there anything that made you for certain that that was not what you were going to do?
I definitely didn't want to go back to jail, but there is this phenomenon you probably know, and when you're in the midst of it, it's like the worst thing that ever existed. But the minute you walk out that door, it's almost like you kind of forget where you just were.
Right.
And I saw that over and over because I would talk to a lot of these people that were these kids that were addicted to drugs, and they would come to me and say, I'm gonna go out there. I'm not gonna do it again. I'm gonna get a job. And then a week or two later, I'd see them come in looking like skeletons all over again. And they were working out when they were in there. They were healthy. They were eating. And it was I just couldn't understand that phenomenon. And that whole subculture, the drug subculture, I just couldn't understand it because I didn't grow up around that. So, but yeah, I mean, it was just that part of not going back was always in the back of my mind, but I think it was more so that I needed to be a father and a husband and somebody that contributed to society.
So your wife, does she still practice law?
She does, yeah.
Wow, I'm sure people are still talking about you.
Well, yeah. A lot of people, when she uses her maiden name and then she uses her last name, my last name also. So she
Right.
calls herself Beretta Nameson. But somebody even to this day, people say, "Oh, Bruce Namenson, do you know him?" And because it's not a common name, so yeah, it's still around. I mean, as a defense attorney, I was respected by a lot of people because they saw that I had that fight in me. But you're only remembered by your last bad act.
Or your only bad act,
Yes, exactly.
because it only
Yeah,
takes one.
yeah,
That's all it takes for you to be labeled in society as the worst person ever. And
yeah,
that's why there has to be people like me and you who can stand up and say people can change. Because the
yeah,
reason we have you here is not particularly to talk about what you did. It's where you are now, because that
yeah.
just made me smile. So let's talk about where you are right now. You are now the owner of a multi-million-dollar health food company. How did that come about?
There was a guy I was in jail with who was very, very well to do, and he and his brother owned this huge construction company, and he was in jail for an OUI. He rear-ended a state trooper, and it was his third OUI. So he was doing 6 months, and he was just a
That's
deer.
all
Yes,
right.
6 month manager, but this guy was a deer in the headlights. I mean, he was scared. He wouldn't come out of it, and they put him right in the pre-release from the day he went in. So he sat in his room, would not come out of his room, and I went in every day and I talked to him and I just kind of counseled him and I told him that it's not the end of the world, whatever. Every day we had a talk. So
Right.
I got out of jail and I kind of looked him up to see what he was doing. And I was working for my friend at the scrapyard. I reached out to him. I said, Tim, I said, is there anything we can do together? I'd love to just get out of this and do something worthwhile. And he said, well, I was thinking there's this restaurant in Newton called the Prana Cafe. And he was thinking of buying it. And he said, do you want to manage it for me? And I said, yeah, I don't know anything about the restaurant business, but I'd love to. So he said, if you can put the deal together, we'll do it. So I ended up calling the owners. We put the deal together, and that's where I started. It was a vegan restaurant in Newton called the Prana Cafe, and we took it over and we opened it. I loved it. I mean, I was working 12, 14 hours a day, but I just loved it because it was kind of like, it felt like it was my own.
Right. So where did the progression start for you where you ventured into this health food company?
So from there, I saw a lot of people that came in that were plant-based eaters, and they constantly told me about all these diseases they had that were eradicated because of the way they were eating. And I just found it intriguing. And I started doing research, and my partner wanted to go the non-organic route, and we kind of had a little falling out. So I walked away. I actually was on unemployment for about 6 months, and then a friend of mine came to me and says, look, you were doing all this stuff at the restaurant. Why don't we open up a company where the same snacks you were making there, we can make and we can start selling? And I said, yeah, let's do it. So we started he had $500, I had $500. And, we bought a small dehydrator and started taking nuts. And I had all the recipes in my head, and we started making them, and we started going to yoga studios because those are the people that are, that know about this plant-based eating. And, it started taking, before we knew it, within 3 months, we had about 60 locations that we were in, and I was making the stuff out of my house. We didn't even have a place to do it, which probably wasn't, in code with the Board of Health, but, yeah. So then one of our first customers was this girl who owned a yoga studio, and she had a little space next to her, and it wasn't being used. So I called the landlord and I said, would you rent us that space? And I told him we have no money. He says, if you fix it up, you can have it for $200 a month for the first year.
Wow.
So we got his family, my family went in there, put the tile floor down and painted the thing. And then we were all kind of off and running. So we did that he and I for about a year and a half. And then the company just started taking off.
And when it started taking off, what did that feel like?
It was definitely rewarding to see, kind of almost like reinvent yourself and see where I came from being a lawyer and not being, I always, there's a part of me, and it's like my heart is like cut in two, because the courtroom was like my living room. I mean, I was so comfortable in the courtroom that, if I'm the way I'm talking to you now, that's how I would be in court, very confident. And Marty Leppo always said to me, he says, judges don't know what they're doing. You have to tell them what to do. And that always just stuck in my head. And I always had that train of thought, and I would never, ever back down. And when they told me that this was the end of the road, I would always say, nope, there's another road I can take. And, but yes, it just felt like I missed it, but I said, I'll do this for now. And then I'll see, maybe I'll go back eventually.
So you have this company. So I watched your interview on 98.1 Urban Heat. I saw that everyone was chomping on these nuts, all different types of nuts, ranch, and all different types of nuts. And I said, I should have gotten some of those before we did this interview.
Yeah, I'll send you some.
No, so I can tell people how they taste, actually, so that they can go out and buy some. Because again, your story, a lot of people may look at you, and I said this before we actually started the interview, was that people would look at you and say, well, yes, so what? He was an attorney, he went to jail, he did his time, he committed a crime he shouldn't have, because he was an attorney, so he knew better. But he comes out and he is successful. Why? Because he's white, and there's this thing called white privilege. So now you're talking about, this isn't about you being successful because this was the way things were laid out for you. Some people may look at you and say, well, he was white. White people, they always lean on their feet after they get out of jail. They know somebody that knows somebody, and that's how they end up getting jobs. What do you say to that?
I think part of it is true. And, after a year and a half, my friend running this business and us just kind of collecting checks to pay the bills and, just struggling to kind of get by, I did bump into this guy who had some money. And, I made a presentation to him and told him what we were doing. And, he was very interested in the company. Not to say that black or white can't go out and find somebody that's well-to-do and say, look, I have this company, I have this idea, I need somebody to take it to the next level. He believed in me. And maybe it was because of my passion for what I was doing. I don't think it had anything to do with me being white and him white. I think and some people might think that that's not true, but I think if I were black and I went to him and I had the same passion and laid out the plan that I had for this company, I think it could have been the same thing for anybody. Not to say that anybody can do that, but I think that if you put your mind to something, you can accomplish it.
And I believe you, because what you're doing is, you definitely, that song started from the bottom. Now we're here. Come on, Bruce. I know you know it.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's exactly what happened to you, because I never once heard you mention your wife and her having a hand in you getting to where you're getting. No, she gave you moral and emotional support.
Yeah.
I heard you say, I was on unemployment. I only had $500. He had $500. We put this $500 together, and this is how we made it work. Yeah, my family went in. We cleaned the place up. That's where family comes in. They clean the place up. But you started this company, and it's been one of your greatest accomplishments.
Yeah.
Besides being an attorney, because this is something that you started. And then I have to say this because I heard you say this on your last interview. You hired a couple of people at the restaurant who were convicted felons because, of course, you want to help people. People, you get out, you want them to come on board, you want to do. And what happened with your probation officer or your parole officer? What did they say to you about it?
My parole officer was the nicest guy in the world. In fact, he lived in Walpole, the same town I live in. My probation officer came to my house, saw my house, and it's a very nice house. And my wife maintained it while I was away.
Right.
And they foreclosed on it twice. And to be honest with you, I guess this is where an attorney comes in, because I filed an injunction from jail against the mortgage company, because that was the time where all that stuff was going on, where they were giving mortgages to anybody, and it was just toxic assets. And I filed it, and they wouldn't even have me into court to argue it, but I was able to forestall it for 3 years without them foreclosing on the house. But I think the probation officer, when he came there, he basically thought that my lifestyle hadn't changed, even though I was making, $600 a week, and my wife was struggling too. And we had a very high mortgage, and, I think he just resented me from day one. And he just really, really, he surrendered me twice. And when I went into court that day, and I told the judge, and it was the same judge that sentenced me, and I told her what I had done from the day I got out to where I was now. She actually applauded me for what I had accomplished, and not just threw in the towel like a lot of other people would have done. And she said, "I'm not going to surrender him. Look what he's done." But she did order me. At the time, I was only paying a couple $100 a month in restitution, and she said, how here's your earning capacity. You're going to pay $2,000 a month in restitution. And it's been a struggle even through this whole pandemic. But he found out that I hired some convicted felons, and he basically told me that if I didn't let them go, that he was going to bring me back in before Judge Fabricant and surrender me again. So
you're off probation sooner than later at this point with the
a couple
pocket.
of years. Yeah.
Well, now it could be sooner, right? So if that's the case, do you plan on hiring convicted felons?
I would, something, I've met some of the nicest people on the inside that just made mistakes. I mean, I can show you my phone. I still text these guys that grew up in, Roxbury and Mattapan, and they always tell me how much they appreciate me from the inside, and how I didn't look at them differently than everybody else. And, to me, that means a lot to me, because it shows, look at every black person thinks that every white person is racist. And I can't blame them for thinking that, because of what they've been through throughout history. But for somebody that tries their hardest to look at people, like they are, and to try to eradicate all those preconceived notions, I mean, it's very difficult to do. I could be walking down the street in Roxbury, and I'm all by myself, and a black guy comes walking toward me, and you can't help what goes through your mind, because you didn't grow up in that arena, But I tried my hardest when I was in there to just treat everybody with respect, and treat everybody like they were my brother. And I walked around calling everybody my brother, and the white guys are, "You can't call him your brother. I mean, they're gonna think that you're mocking them or whatever." But
No politics.
yeah, so but there's guys that text me to this day, and I still keep in contact with them. And and I just think that those types of relationships, where everybody said they were acquaintances, and I've carried them on for 10 years now, and I consider these people my friends.
Right.
I think there's something to be said about that bond that you develop while you're in there, if you're that type of person. A lot of people just go in, they either sleep their life away, or they don't want to talk to anybody. But I just wasn't that person. I wanted to kind of dissect people and figure out why they got there.
I agree with you. I have a lot of friends to this day, and a lot of people still say to me, "Why would you want to stay in contact with people that it's a time in your life where you went through the most difficult time, but it's where you learned the most things about yourself. And those are the people you broke bread with. Those are the people that loved on you when you were crying. And for women, it's different because
Yeah.
we're emotional.
Yeah.
So those are the people that when I didn't have canteen or when my money came late, those are the people that came to my door with food. And the no lending and borrowing policy didn't
Yeah.
apply. They didn't really care. So I agree with you on all fronts as far as people that you meet in prison are not the worst people. I
Yeah.
think this is the reason why we need to have more conversations like this, because we find that society has definitely put us in a whole other category. And it seems like in a whole nother world, as far as if we've ever been to prison, if we have quarries, if any of those things. And then I look at somebody like you, and I can't necessarily say that you've come this far because you were white, and I can say that you've come this far because you were determined.
Yeah.
Because at this point, the type of crimes that they allege that you committed, the type of crimes that they allege that I committed, the only thing you can think about doing is how to get a quick buck when you're behind the eight ball. So I applaud you for not even going that route, because it's very easy to do, especially
Yeah.
if you've already done it once. It's very easy to slip back into that way.
No question. And I can see how easy it is, and I can see how people fall into that vortex where they just keep spinning around. And it's just a constant cycle. You know, that's why they call it life on the installment plan. You know, I mean, it doesn't stop.
I know.
You know, you know as well as I do, they used to hand out, like Indita was talking about this, these 20-year Concord sentences.
Yep.
And then every time they got surrendered, they go back in for a year. I mean, they end up doing that 20 years over a 30-year period or whatever it is, or, you know, it's just crazy that they want to have that control over somebody for that long a period of time.
Yes. And it is very sad, but I also know that there's a lot of success in people who come out of prison. And I'm looking at one of them. And I'm, you know, I'm proud of you. So I haven't known you very long, but I think that this is something that people should take a look at, especially people who are on the fence about someone who's been to prison. Let's take away the fact that you were an attorney, because at this point, no one cares that you were an attorney because you committed crime. So that's off the fence.
Yeah.
You're not an attorney to them anymore. And besides, you're a crooked attorney. It's like being a crooked cop.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
For you to be on this side of the fence and then have this multi-million-dollar company, what would you say? What would be one piece of advice that you would give anyone that may be doing what they allege that you did to become incarcerated? What would that be? What would that look like? What piece of advice would you give somebody or a listener who's thinking about ways to get fast cash, especially because now we're in the middle of a pandemic? What would be the one piece of advice that you would give them?
I think it's kind of to the point where if you have something that you think, you know, today there's so many ways you can set up something online and you can sell something online. And I just think it's a question of not giving up. And, you know, I just know a lot of people, white, black, Asian, they just give up. And I think that's you know, it's an easy thing to do. And I think not giving up is a very, very difficult thing to do. But I just think anybody has it in them to be able to do that. You know, and it's not a question of intelligence. It's a question of just having that fortitude to move forward. I mean, it's so easy to throw the towel in and say, I just can't do it, you know? And, you know, there's this one guy that it's funny because he was my when I was in when I went over to Norfolk, and they had this new man unit. They had like 40 different bunks. It was like a dormitory.
Right.
And there was one CO at the front of the room, and I needed a certain visit time for my wife and kids, so they put me in what they call the ghetto. I was the only white guy in the back, and they were all playing dice and, you know, battle rapping in the back, and my bed was right in the middle of all of them. And there was this one kid who looked like Snoop Dogg, and they called him Snoop. Right. And the guy on the bottom bunk moved out, and he was still on the top. I said, Snoop, aren't you going to move to the bottom bunk? He's like, nope, I like to be high the way I stacks my money. into this. And it's funny because I connected with him after about 2 years ago. And I haven't seen him in probably 8 or 9 years. And I told him that story, and he told his mother, his sister, and they were hysterical. And this guy's making money, and he's been working for UPS, and he got caught. He had a gun charge. He did a mandatory 2 years. And now he's, you know, and it's funny. The reason I thought about him is my son went to Walpole High School, and there was this kid there, and his last name was the same last name as his. And I went up to him. I said, "Does your father look like Snoop Dogg, or your relative?" And he's like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And then I had said to my son, I said, "You got to find out, because I know there's some connection there. It wasn't a common name." Right. And then I found out that was him, and I said, "I need to find this guy. Where is he?" He said he works at Home Depot in South Bay. I went to South Bay Home Depot. I knew his last name. I forgot his first name, but I looked him up and I found him, at Home Depot. And this is right when he got out, and he got a job at Home Depot. And then he got fired because they found out about his record. And then he started working for UPS, and he's been working there ever since. And he's got a very, very good job at UPS. And I sent him some snacks and all kinds of stuff. And we talk all the time. It's just, you know.
Another success story.
What's that?
Another success story.
Yeah, no, and this kid grew up in Roxbury.
Right. So again, I say this to all the listeners, all the people that will view this. Just know that Bruce doesn't look like a convicted felon. He doesn't even look like he served 1 day in jail. Be careful of the labels that you put on people. Be careful of the things that you say about people.
Yeah.
And Bruce, I'm glad that you decided not to be the person that they called you. You didn't answer to it. I'm grateful for that because a lot of people, they get so tired that they just start answering to whatever they're called. So I appreciate you coming on the show. I want you to give people your everything about your health food company, the website, so we can go on and order peanuts, what you sell. Give us the 411.
Yeah, it's called healthytruth.com. And we actually manufacture all of Tom Brady's TB12 snacks, and that we've been doing that for about 5 years. And it's all plant-based, sprouted nuts and energy squares, dried fruits. Everything is as pure as the driven snow. No added sugars, and it's just really, really good quality food. And it tastes good too, which is even a bonus. And I'm gonna get your address afterwards, and I'm gonna send you some stuff. You're gonna love it.
You must have been reading my mind because I was going to say, well, you guys, I have not tasted it yet, but
I'll get you some.
I'll take his word for it that if
Yeah.
Tom Brady's eating it, it must be pretty good. So you have a website. Do you have a store or is it just?
No, we manufacture everything in Walpole and we ship all over the country. So I'll send you a nice box and you can show it to all your, you can talk about it to all your listeners.
And I will. And I definitely will have you come back in a couple of months, maybe like 6 months, and see where you're at then. And
Yeah, definitely.
maybe you won't be on probation anymore. And so you could hire some people that really need you.
I would love that. If I could give people the chance that I got, then that would mean the world to me. So
Everybody, this is Bruce, former attorney. Now he owns a multi-million-dollar company called Healthy Truth. Check him out, you guys. Thank you for joining Not Your Normal Conversation tonight with your girl Tawana B. Stay tuned. I'll see you next week.